not their last beard, their second to last beard. And beard, I mean front man for Skull and Bones. And he incorporated Skull and Bones and was a librarian there at New Haven. And then he went on to become the first president of Johns Hopkins University, which basically gives us the the medicine system that we have today, and was also the first president of University of California there in Berkeley. And there's a street named after him there, and there's a big connection between San Francisco and Skull and Bones.
Yeah, flesh that out for us, if you will.
Well, here's how the secret societies rule the world. Okay, I mean it's a basic leviathan of 3 levels, and each level has 3 parts. And the top level is mining, metal, and money. You know, and if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you control the mining, then you have a good chance of controlling the metal, then you have a good chance of controlling the money. I mean, it used to be that our money was metal. And when you look at Skull and Bones, when you look at the members, you know, you find a lot of mining engineers. Matter of fact, Charlotte Iserbyt's family came into it through
her
mining. Grandfather, who was the first member, was a gold mining engineer. And but like the Dodges and the Kellogg's of Skull and Bones aren't the Dodges and Kellogg's of the cars and the cereal. They're the Dodges and Kellogg's of minings, and they have the Ansons and the Stokes and the Phelps and all of this. And you look at the history of California and Arizona both, and you find these guys from Skull and Bones there scooping up the mineral rights right at the beginning. And then the next level is drugs, guns, and oil. And it was a gentleman from Skull and Bones, Dr. Benjamin Silliman Jr., who in 1855 made gasoline for the first time out of petroleum, rock oil. Okay, and he did this for the Rock Oil Company of Pennsylvania, and it was based in New York, but and it was for the Bissells and for the Townsends. And he wrote a report, and he said, "Gee, gentlemen, I think you have some very inexpensive products with a very inexpensive process. Some very valuable products with a very inexpensive process." And as soon as he wrote that report, the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company of New York passed into hands of investors of New Haven, Connecticut. And then they proceeded to monopolize everything around oil. The internal combustion engines patents go back to the 1840s. They'd been using a coal gas that you can make, and they proceeded to just monopolize it around health, around plastics, and so much so that Mr. Diesel over in Europe, and if you read his writings, he says, "I'm doing this because I have a social consciousness, and I do not want the small industrialist and the farmer to be beholden to this monopoly." So he presented his diesel engine at the Paris exhibition of 1900, ran it 24/7 on nothing but peanut oil. Mm-hmm. Anything you can squish between 2 stones, okay? Well, they hounded his patent, they hounded his money. Finally, a guy in England said, "Oh, Rudolph, I'll help you." So Rudolph got in a boat, and everybody woke up the next morning, and Rudolph had
He had a little accident.
He committed suicide, jumped overboard, and soon his engine then was retrofitted to run on petrochemicals, and it was started to run on just any kind of bio fuel. And the only reason we go to the oil store is because these guys own it. And drugs, Skull and Bones was started by a drug smuggler and a family and a politician. The politician grew up to be the Attorney General of Ulysses S. Grant administration, very corrupt administration. And from a pragmatic standpoint, okay, if you want to look at their ability to control the country, okay, it goes to the 13th Amendment of the Constitution. There used to be a completely different 13th Amendment of the Constitution. It was ratified in Virginia, printed in constitutions up through the 1870s. Okay, when this gentleman was Attorney General. They were able to say, "Oh, well, that thing didn't really get ratified and blah, blah, blah. And so, I mean, that's their ability to hoodwink us, to make us think that something else is going on. And in the 13th Amendment basically has to do with lawyers and whether they're going to be a lawyer and work for the bar out of England, or if they're going to be a member of our government. It basically says you can either be a lawyer or you can't be in the government. And so, and drugs, guns, and oil. And guns, I mean, the Whitneys, if you look at the history of Connecticut, where Skull and Bones is based, all the Browning automatic weapons of World War I and World War II were made in a factory just right up the street from the Skull and Bones Temple. That's what they call it. We call it, us barbarians call it the tomb, but they call it their. And all the, GE is based out of Connecticut. All the jet engines, the submarines, were based out of Groton, Connecticut. The helicopters started there. Huge military might is built there in Connecticut. And then how the last level is media, movies, and quote unquote magic. And that, again, is their ability to hoodwink us, to make us think something else is going on, and their preponderance of using these rituals as part of their control mechanism.
Well, let's shift, if we can, into some of the foreign policy stuff. A lot of it Anthony Sutton outlined, but you've got the class of 1917 Skull and Bones. I think about half of them went to work for Averell Harriman's Brown Brothers Harriman. He's, of course, from the Whitney family, as you pointed out. That's where Prescott Bush comes into the picture, the Walker side of the family, and a lot of other notable Skull and Bones people. And they were involved in the Soviet coup, they were involved in backing the Nazis, and a whole lot more. What's your take on that whole?
Well, my take on it is the Nazis didn't lose the war. They were brought over here by the Dulles brothers against direct written orders from Harry Truman. And it's you can only do the iron hand. The iron hand doesn't really work. I mean, there's too much opposition, so they have to do it through the soft hand. Basically, Prescott Bush was involved with counterintelligence in World War II. World War I. Prescott started off training as artillery, but he left World War II as an intelligence aide. And that's basically how, he got away with running the German steel industry through the Union Banking Corporation. That's basically what it was. It was a holding company for German Steel, Thyssen, which was the largest manufacturer, and had a lot to do with helping set up Auschwitz. Because he claims to be counterintelligence. Okay, I mean, and right now you look at foreign policy, which is really run more by the intelligence services than by the State Department. Right now, they're supposed to tell 8 people what they're doing, okay? And sometimes that gets down to just 4 people that they have to tell. And if you look at those people they have to tell, one of the main people they have to tell right now is Dianne Feinstein. Well, you look at Dianne Feinstein and her new husband, Mr. Bloom, and you find that they're involved in all kinds of operations because, see, once the intelligence services have to, can talk to you, then you get to do things for them. And if you look at their net wealth has just skyrocketed. And they're doing all kinds of interesting things with China and whatnot, because as far as I'm concerned, the end game of the secret societal system is to rule the world through China. And right now, all they're doing is they're using America's blood and wallet to get the world into shape. And what is it that we're doing? We're going into places in Africa and in Asia, basically where, the tribes still rule. Okay, there's no really government rule. Okay, and so it's basically, kill the Indians and take their land. And once they get the world into shape, okay, China stands up and says, "Cur American war dog. We're Chinese. We've got 5,000 years of civilization. Confucius, peace, peace, peace. Oh, and by the way, please send all the money to us because we have all the factories." And so I mean that's what I see the secret societal system, and their foreign policy has basically been about control, about controlling the foreign policy. Getting America, involved. I mean, and again, going back to the founder, you have William Huntington Russell, the drug person, and then you have Alfonso Taft. Okay, Alfonso Taft was Secretary of State and also Secretary of War, among many other things, and we as a culture, as a society altogether, we have what are known as self-correcting devices, because we really aren't on a death trip. We aren't looking to just all kill ourselves here. And the first self-correcting device is something I call it the dark hallway. It's known to us as the historical dialectic. And basically, you walk down a dark hallway a while and you bump into one side, and then after a while, you bump into the other side. Well, I say some things that I know that are true about drug smuggling, intelligence agencies, and secret societies. And then I find people that I know that are spooks saying stuff just a little bit wilder that has some truth in it, but also has a bunch of non-truth in it. And that's because by controlling the extremes, you control the middle, okay? The next self-correcting device is a thing called the cycle of generations. And again, there's a very good book out of sociology called Generations, A History of America's Future. And they go in back to the 12th century and show how there's these 4 generations that continue through history, and they just help each other move things along. And they show in that book how, because of the Civil War and the assassination of a president, there was a generation that didn't cohese. And some of the people went out, joined the generation ahead of them. Some joined generations after them. Some just went out in the woods and did weird stuff. Well, once we're only 3 instead of 4, we're weaker as a culture, as a society. And with that weakness, and they're starting to control the government, they were able then to get us into the Spanish-American War, which was, done through a false flag event, done through, It
was an admitted fraud, using the media to goad them all along.
Right, yellow journalism, okay, and at its core, it was about drugs, okay, because you see, these guys made huge amounts of money smuggling drugs to China. After the Second Opium War in the mid-1800s, they lost their cash cow. Okay, it took a while for the Chinese to realize that, wait a minute, I don't need you smugglers anymore. I can just call up India and have them send me a boatload, and I'll pay the duties and whatnot. But you can see in international finance where they lost their cash cow, and they went from controlling numbers in corporations to not as much. And so, because the Spanish-American War, you had Teddy Roosevelt, and see, the Roosevelts were heavily involved with the opium trade at one time. They were ship owners and ship captains. And then Franklin Roosevelt's grandfather, Warren Delano, was the chief factor for Russell and Company in Canton for 20 years. And so the family was heavily involved with it. Well, Teddy Roosevelt was Under Secretary of Navy. He told the Secretary of the Navy had the gout one day. And this was before Spanish-American War, and